Ahem, ahem, ahem. Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is, and you know what time it is. It's time for a weekly track roundup where I go over what I felt were the best and worst tracks of this past week. First, I want to shout out our sponsor in this video, the good people over at SeatGeek. If you didn't know about them, they are an app that aggregates ticket prices from all across the web to make ticket purchasing simple. They put a 0 to 100 score on each ticket to let you know if you're getting a good deal or a bad one. Green is good, red is bad. And their in-app view from Seat lets you see where you're going to sit. Enter code DROP to get $20 off your first order. Click on the link in the description below to download the app and get more info. SeatGeek. Ba-bam. All right, also, of course, as always, our Amazon and Turntable Lab associate links are down below. Hit up that Turntable Lab link. Get yourself a record, turntable, speakers, some audiophile stuff. We get kickback from it. Supports the channel, supports the segment. And a few more shout-outs. Want to give a shout-out to this new track from the one and only St. Vincent. This is Slow, Slow Disco. So she's kind of come out with another version of the song Slow Disco, and now this new track is like a very stripped back and lovely little piano ballad version. It's quite nice. It's quite nice. Matthew Dear, electronic music producer and songwriter Matthew Dear, has seen fit to remix every single song from the new MGMT album. We have linked you to one of the tracks below. Give it a shot. Try it out. Pretty neat. Also, Kalela, a track from her last full-length record, which was definitely one of the more abstract R&B albums of the decade. The track Waitin' has a new Kaytranada mix out. Do give that a shot. And Fleet Foxes, the famed indie folk outfit Fleet Foxes. They have a B-Sides collection from 2006 to 2009 dropping. And there's a song below linked in the shout-out section from that you can try out too. And Deerhoof have a little band camp up attached to a 7-inch where I guess they play the music of The Shining. You can preview a track from it. Pretty interesting. Not something I would have ever expected from Deerhoof, but what do you know? All right, let's get into the tracks I thought were the worst tracks this week. Making good time in this episode already. A few minutes in, already in the worst tracks. But bam, let's go. This new track from T.I. featuring Young Thug titled The Weekend is a very messy, trapped, auto-tuned pile of blah. And T.I. absolutely sounds dreadful on the song. Young Thug does his thing very predictably, as you kind of would guess he would, given the high-profile feature and the generic trap beat. It's really just spectacularly unspecial and offensively so. Next, the band Spiritual Cramp have come out with a brand new single, The Erasure, which I found to be horrendously awkward and demented to the point where it was just unenjoyable. Some of these weirder, more experimental elements I think worked to their benefit on the Police State EP, Next to My Head Over Here, that dropped earlier this year. But for whatever reason, I think a lot of those elements are totally working against them in this new song and music video. Moving on from there, new song, Shallow, from Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, from the upcoming film A Star Is Born, a retelling of an older story from an older film by the same name. It's essentially about two fictional country stars who were once regular folk, and they're being played by a rich girl from New York and the son of a stockbroker. Peak culture, if you ask me. They live out their love in the spotlight, and it's just an emotional roller coaster, I guess, is all one can say. Can't really say I cared that much for the overly dramatic and showy ballad. Can't say I am interested all that much in the storyline, the plot. It's just going to have to be a film that I don't know. Maybe I'll Redbox it one day. after a binge on something illegal. Moving on from there, a new Coheed and Cambria track, Old Flames, which sounds like just really annoying prog pop emo. Just never really been in the band sound, and they continue to prove to me exactly why I've never been into the band sound. All right, let's get into the tracks I thought were meh. Not terrible, but not blowing me away either. But certainly worth your attention, I thought, if you're into some of these artists. Let's go. Number one, let's learn to talk. Unknown Mortal Orchestra have a new record on the way. The new song that they have released here is called Hanoi 06. And it is one of many tracks named just in, numerical order, Hanoi 06, 07, 08. It's basically an instrumental album that the band recorded while they were in Vietnam with a guest collaborator, and it sounds like a trippy, jazzy, experimental, wild little session, and kind of thinking the first taste of it over here is pretty neat. Give it a shot. Definitely an interesting turn of creative events for Unknown Mortal Orchestra. Didn't know this would ever be a style of album they'd be interested in recording or releasing. Moving on from there, Terra Mellos have a new track out, Lemon Grove. Rob Crow, indie vet Rob Crow, appears on the track. And the guitar work is interesting. Weird grooves and riffs and time signatures and that sort of thing. Terra Mellos is a math rock band. You know what you're getting. But I didn't really care for the way that they layered their vocals on top of the rock instrumentation, although that typically ends up being the case for me with Terra Mellos, but for longtime fans, they're probably fine with it. They probably like it at this point. Moving on from there, Mick Jenkins, Chicago rapper, drops a relatively short but wordy and smart track titled Elephant in the Room. Looking forward to when he drops a new full-length project again, so he has been pretty active keeping his name out there, so I'm sure that's going to happen sooner rather than later. Moving on from there, Kodak Black, If I'm Lying, I'm Flying, a brand new single from him where the production and his vocal recording and his flow just sounds a little bit more straightforward, cleaner, and more enjoyable than usual. Kodak sounds a bit more, on the ball, not as kind of falling all over the place vocally. Not that I don't mind a bit of an accent or a drawl on my vocals. That's completely fine. But there are some moments when I hear him rapping, it just sort of sounds like he's not all there in the studio, or he's obviously inhibited in some kind of way, which I think hurts his performance. But here it sounds like he's really clean and focused, and I think it's resulted in a better listen. Moving on from there, Juicy J and Travis Scott team up on a brand new single titled Neighbor. Travis has some pretty big, showy vocals on the track, and Juicy J handles the verses on here. It's pretty much to be expected. Not really the explosive sort of collision of names and worlds that I hoped it would be, given just how great Juicy was on Travis's Rodeo, but I guess they can't all be winners. Moving on from there, JIDK with Cue to Fool on this brand new track, Electric, I thought would be a bit more exciting, but it's just kind of a standard trap-flavored piece of pop rap. But the instrumentation is a bit eerier than maybe your standard track in this style, though eerie and moody is kind of the flavor of the day. Pretty straightforward and to the point and hooky for Jay, although I'm not sure if I will predict this track as sort of going viral or anything like that. And Empress of has a nice little synth pop single out titled Love for Me. Maybe not as memorable as the single she dropped just a few weeks ago, but it's still pretty sweet. Still pretty sweet. All right, let's move on to the tracks I thought were the best ones this week. Best tracks, quite a few, because a lot of songs did stand out to me this week. First, production from Kenny Beats, rapper Zach Fox, Square Up. This thing is a nasty, disgusting, gross, violent banger that totally crushed my skull and blew me away. Really impressed with Zach's over-the-top and aggressive performance on this track. Kenny's production is hard-hitting, and I love how distorted and heavy and just violent the beat sounds. But I love how he leaves a lot of space in there for Zach to go completely insane and for a lot of his bars to just really stick. Moving on from there, this new track over here comes by way of a recommendation from a good friend of mine on the internet, a man who goes by the name of Cluner. He turned me on to this rapper who goes by the name of her name is Tiny Jag, and I'm not familiar with her work, but she has this new kind of like double-sided track out titled Riding and Cut Her Hair. And I thought it was really goofy and awkward at first, and the only way that I could come to describe it is that it sounds pretty much like Grimes doing a trap song, or basically like somebody wants to make trap rap but is really hugely into Grimes music. And the second half of the track, she almost has like a bit of a Princess Nokia vibe, I would say. But I do think she has some clever lyrics on this track. The beat is really eerie. Her melodic flow and her inflection is very odd. Again, even though this comparison for me was really obvious, I can't think of a whole lot of rappers that sound just like her. So I don't know. Shout out to her. Shout out to her. It sounds like she has some cool shit going on with her music, and it's definitely something I'll be looking out for in the future. Moving on from there, got to give a shout out to the good people over at Accelerator. They run a really great electronic music blog, and they turned me on to this great producer out of Detroit who has a couple of really sweet tracks out titled Void and Corruption, a guy by the name of Sinstar. And I definitely want to point you guys to this Corruption track. It is an insanely intricate, rhythmically complex piece of electronic music that's maybe a little drum and bass influenced. It's super minimalist as well, as there's not a whole lot of layers to it, but the layers that are involved are very busy and very hard hitting. I love how just simultaneously the track feels like I'm processing it very intently because there's so much going on, and yet it almost feels kind of skeletal. It feels really stripped down in a way, and raw and exciting. So really kind of loving what this guy is doing with his production so far. It just seems like some really no BS, very focused and very cutting edge electronic music. Moving on from there, rapper Shad has a new track out, a very urgent track with a lot of socially charged lyrics. The Stone Throwers is the name of the new cut. There's a lot of very important, and if I didn't use this word already, excuse me, but again, urgent issues that he addresses on this track, and he does it in a very smart and a lyrical fashion. To me, this song, as short as it is, though, it's very much like sounding the alarms, like, this shit is not okay. This shit is not fucking normal. Like, what the hell? It's a pretty significant track, and definitely one of the most fiery and, I'll say it again, urgent songs that I've really ever heard Shad drop. And typically his stuff is, can be pretty uplifting, can be pretty inspiring, and not to say that if someone makes that kind of music, they always have to make that kind of music. But this song definitely struck me because it really had a strong note of darkness that I think a lot of his other songs don't usually have. Moving on from there, I got turned on to this artist via the good people over at Stereogum, Rose Doll Hush. Just some really creatively layered and off the beaten path indie folk over here with some gorgeously composed vocals and instrumentation. Not the boldest and most out there sound I've heard in this genre, but very nicely assembled. And again, the melodies are very pretty. Moving on from there, shout out once more to the good people over at Accelerator. They turned me on to another song over here from a producer by the name of Purdue. Saramosa is the name of this new track, and it has a driving kick drum and what sounds like a lot of acoustic primal instrumentation all over the track. It is a nice piece of electroacoustic production with a great groove, great beat, and a lot of interesting vocal samples, a lot of interesting foreign vocal samples laced into it too. Moving on from there, Muse have a brand new track out, Simulation Theory, forthcoming record very soon. If you guys have been checking out the singles so far, you know that they are on a bit of an 80s synthy throwback Jag. And believe it or not, I think this new track that they've just dropped is pretty great. It's called Pressure, and it's actually a really fun pop rock single. The whole 80s shtick is limited a bit more to just the music video than the song itself, but the guitar leads and the hooks on the Hook's vocals is basically what I want to point out here are actually pretty sharp and again pretty fun, even though it is a very tightly and cleanly produced piece of pop rock. There's still a bit of an edge to it, a good groove, sounds very lively, and kind of enjoying it. There's a sweet bit of campiness to it that I think is really fun. Interesting to see Muse in a point in their career where they're not taking themselves too seriously, I guess. Moving on from there, I want to give a shout out to this metal outfit by the name of Javura. I hope I'm saying their name correctly. They have a new record out with several tracks on it. This is one of them, The Putrid Stench of Rotting Flesh. It is a lengthy, brutal, and hard-hitting piece of what sounds like black metal fused with crust punk. It's pretty nasty. It's pretty freaking nasty. And the performance is animalistic, too. Far too often, there are a lot of black metal bands out there. It just sort of seems like, you know, they hit the fast strums, they hit that blast beat, and they just kind of hang there. And then after a while, it just becomes white noise. These guys, it really kind of seems like they're putting a lot of muscle into every drum hit, into every guitar strum, into every lick, every vocal. Just really seems like everything's up to frickin' 11, and I'm liking that. One more, Fucked Up. Dose Your Dreams, new record on the way. And they have seen fit to drop some more material from that album. The song that I wanted to point out is Accelerate. And, you know, I'm actually kind of impressed with what the band is doing with this latest string of material, because it seems like they're putting in more effort to build multiple phases into these songs, build more vocal versatility into these songs, and also the way that they layer noise and guitars on this track, it's actually vaguely shoegazy and kind of experimental too, though still the drums and riffs are very hard-hitting, very straightforward, and keep the energy and the impact of the song high. But there are a lot of interesting little sonic tidbits laced throughout some points of the track that make it a little cerebral and kind of interesting to dive into and kind of explore too. So it's throttling, it's adrenaline pumping, it's exciting, but there's some cool shifts and compositional phases in it, and some interesting sonic experimentation too. So shout out to them. You know, I'm actually looking forward to this record, and it's the first time in a long time I've been looking forward to anything this band does, because and not to be mean and nasty and pick on the band, but I've just always thought they kind of overdid punk to the point where it's like, to the point where I feel like they've kind of lost the appeal of the genre. But to me, this doesn't strictly feel as much like a punk record as much as it does like a post-punk or a noise rock or kind of an experimental punk record or an experimental rock record with some punk elements thrown in there. You know, it seems like a bit more of a sensible balance of influences, in my opinion. And moving on from there, I think this is the second to last track that I wanted to shout out. Clarence Clarity has a new single out, new record on the way, if you guys haven't heard. Fantastic pop producer. I mean, I can't even just say pop because he does everything. But amazing producer, Clarence Clarity. New record on the way. Rafters with AJ Crew is the name of this new single. Now, Clarence, in the recent past, when he has worked with rappers in his music, while the results have been decent, I have been a little skeptical as to how this would pan out into the future. Though, for a guy like him, as versatile as he is, I could see the temptation to do that. And given the current zeitgeist, I see and I understand the need to do that. But despite my skepticism and my worry, this new track with AJ Crew is actually fantastic. Not only does AJ kill it on this track, but Clarence's approach to producing this beat, which is a fusion of like pop production, but also hip hop production too, is absolutely insane, kaleidoscopic, overwhelming, exciting, and orgasmic. This is a great beat, and I cannot wait for this dude to drop this new full-length album. I hope more people are paying attention to his music in general and to this forthcoming record. than his last record was paid attention to, because I feel like he just did not get enough respect on that record because it really was such an inventive pop album. And finally, want to shout out Bad Bad Not Good and Little Dragon teaming up for a brand new single. The single is titled Tried, and it's a funky, laid-back, beautiful little ballad with some nice vocals from Little Dragon, some cool drum beats from Bad Bad Not Good. It just kind of seemed like a pretty plain and obvious fusion of the both of them and their respective sounds and styles, but the tune is good, so can't really dislike or fault the track for any clear reason. Just kind of seemed like a pretty funky, straightforward, chill, laid-back ballad that was very nice and pleasant on the ears. You know, certainly a collaboration that I think could have gone over much worse than it actually did. I'm pretty pleased that this turned out as good as it did. So that has been the weekly track roundup, everybody. Those are all the tracks that I would love to point your attention to. Remember to hit up our sponsor over at SeatGeek if you want to get some tickets in a convenient fashion, because again, they do support the segment, they do support the show. And I hope y'all are doing well. I hope you got some good recommendations out of this video. Remember, all the songs we talked about are down there, linked in the description box. And I will catch you in the next one. Love you forever.